Hey horror fans, Bored Now back with you. Today I'm going to be talking about the new Silent Night, Deadly Night movie, a remake of the 80s cheesy slasher classic, and it sticks roughly to certainly the same premise and roughly the same plot, but there are some big changes as we go along, and they kind of play with the structure a little bit, and there's one particular gimmick which they're doing which is different from the original movie. Directed by Mike P. Nelson, who did Wrong Turn 2021, which was kind of like a soft reboot of that franchise. I thought that movie was okay, but pretty solid. And he also did one of the VHS movies. He did VHS 85, which I haven't seen. So the lead of the movie, playing the lead character Billy, is Rohan Campbell. Now, if you don't know who Rohan Campbell is, he is the very divisive Corey from Halloween Ends. And the co-lead is Ruby Medine. So she is a singer and actress, and she is the daughter of Matthew Modine. She's probably best known for being in the second Happy Death Day movie, and I remember quite enjoying her in that movie. She was also in the US version of the show Shameless. She plays the co-lead, and she has a bigger part in this, like the character has a bigger part in this movie than in the 80s film. Billy, when he's young, experiences his parents being killed by someone dressed as Santa randomly. So as a result, he is traumatized. Every time Christmas comes around, he's haunted by that memory, and there's certain things to do with the holiday that triggers him. And it's one of those very simple things where he puts on a Santa outfit, and for him, getting in the festive mood is actually becoming a psychopath and killing people. So it's a kill a Santa movie. It's a very simple premise, and that's the way the 80s movie plays out. So in this version, Billy comes to a new town on the bus, like a way to try and like restart his life. He starts working in this shop. He becomes attracted to the Ruby Medine character, and they sort of slowly strike up a little bit of a thing. So he settles down, so to speak, but his demons are never far away. He's got a voice in his head who is basically the voice of the guy who murdered his parents all those years ago on Christmas, and he becomes almost like his dark passenger for anyone who has seen Dexter, which I'm guessing is quite a lot of people. He's spate of local killings around the town as well, which becomes a subplot. Really didn't like this movie. I think it started off okay, and it started off as like a solid watchable movie where it was, if you're just taking it as, okay, it's a modern Silent Night, Deadly Night, then it's sort of fine. It was a little bit dull and a bit plodding, but it at least had a bit of momentum to it. Like, I quite appreciated that it cut to the chase quite quickly. It didn't linger on certain things that are going to drag the plot down. It just got to the gist of, he gets on this bus, he goes to a new town. In the original movie, he's in like an orphanage like run by these nuns, and it becomes a little thing that the Mother Superior at the orphanage is a bit of an old battle axe, and she is very sort of stern and harsh with them. Through that orphanage that he gets put into a job, like as a way to like try and help him out. But in this, they just cut that stuff out. Like, it's literally he just gets on the bus to a new town, and he goes into a store at one point, and he kind of, as I said, becomes interested in the Ruby Medine character, decides to apply for a job there. It's a little convenient and like very rushed, and he happens to find a job there, and he happens to like have an interview really fast, like it's insanely fast. He's talking to the dad who's the one who owns the store, and there's this whole thing also about how his daughter who works at the store is eventually going to inherit it when he passes away, and Billy becomes more interested in working at the store and settling down. But I don't mind it so much. It's a way to get into the plot quite quickly. It couldn't really make up its mind what it wanted to be, whether it wanted to be this really grisly, violent, over-the-top horror movie that you could just have fun with, or if it wanted to play it a bit more straight, where there's a little bit more of a drama going on, and it sort of jumped between the two movies. But I think this is a classic example of a modern movie trying to be too clever with what is a very simple premise, and a premise which really you can still do today, and it's going to work. Like the sort of like over the top cheesy slasher thrills of the 80s movies, they're never really going to go away. Like you can update them here and there and do little bits with them, and it's always going to look like a very different movie anyway, because this is little bit more of a high budget movie. Like it's still, compared to a lot of movies, it is low budget, but like compared to the 80s movie, it did feel like it's got like a modern sheen to it. These movies has like a campy charm to it, and it just knows what it is. Like it is this silly sort of slocky like B movie, which falls into like the guilty pleasure so bad it's good, and it kind of just knows that and accepts it, and you can just watch it and enjoy it as that and have a good laugh at it, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's like a charm to that without it ever being like the best movie ever. But the problem is this movie just can't be that. Like this movie has to try and do these kind of wild turns, and they have to like try and invest you in like the relationship, because that's one of the other things, is you get a lot more of the relationship. Like they make it into a whole storyline between Billy and between the Ruby Mundown character, and I just never felt any chemistry between them, and I never really cared about their relationship. Like I think she's a bit underwritten. Like you never really get a sense of what her character is, because for plot reasons you get this really convoluted thing later on in the movie where Billy explains to her the whole backstory. And it was at this point where the movie was getting really cringe and eye-rolly, and I was kind of groaning in the cinema, because he was suddenly throwing all this backstory at us, then had to over-explain things. And that's another issue, is I think by the end of the movie it just throws all this different explanations at you, which you didn't really need. Like this movie definitely would have benefited from just keeping it simple, like less is more. But he's going through this whole backstory with her about what happened to him and why he turned out how he is, and this is the first time she's finding out that he's a killer basically, and what happened to him in the past. But really there's been a lot of red flags, because that's another thing, is like you get a lot of him talking to himself. I mean, he's not talking to himself, he's talking to the voice in his head who keeps chipping in with things, and it's very annoying as well. But he's you know, as far as the outside world goes, he's talking to himself, and at times he does it very obvious, like right in front of people, and they don't really seem to twig, or they don't seem to think, hey, that's weird, he seems to be talking to himself. He just lays this all on her, and she just accepts it without really skipping a beat. Like she's like, okay, that sounds fine. And I think they've been trying to set up that she's maybe a little bit of a bad girl, or maybe has an interest of maybe being drawn towards that kind of person, and this is at the point when they've kind of fallen for each other, which I never really bought into their relationship. And that's part of the problem, is the movie just never makes him charming enough or like sympathetic enough. And once again, you didn't have that problem in the first movie or in the original 80s movie, because they just made it this kind of crazy, wild slasher movie where this guy was clearly could go from like nothing to 100 out of the blue, and you just had like a good time with it. You just enjoyed how silly it was. But with this, it does seem that they are trying to get you into the characters and make you really care, and I never really did. They didn't really do that much with her character, where you could see how she might be attracted to him or attracted to the appeal of, okay, he's explained all this to me and I'm just going to accept it and go along for the ride. Because there's one scene where she does like act out a bit when they're at like a hockey match, a nice hockey match, and she attacks these bullies who are like going after, I think it's like her brother or cousin or something. And she actually goes on the ice, and it's one of the more amusing scenes, but she goes on the ice and starts whacking them and gets really like violent and in their faces. And I guess that's meant to be like the one scene where it's like, okay, she's a little bit feisty. She can take care of herself, and she does have a little bit of a bad side. But for a lot of the movie, she just feels like more of like a regular, like grounded everyday gal. I didn't really think much of him as a lead. Like, he wasn't really that interesting or compelling. I didn't like him in Halloween Ends, but maybe it was more the writing stuff. But yeah, I just don't quite see why he's got these defenders on the internet. He's probably a little bit better in this than he was in that movie, but again, I think it's just this thing of he just looks like a bit of an unnerved psychopath, and then there's no tension. Like, when he turns out to be that, like, it's not really that surprising. Charm to the original, which this just doesn't have, where in the original, him just being this ordinary like guy, and the actor just being so over the top and hammy, and just out of the blue just snapping and going to extremes. Like, they made it into a fun, like, black sort of comedy, and yeah, this doesn't really do that. It tries to play it a bit too straight. And then that brings us to the stupid Dexter type plot, like the voice in the head, which he has throughout the movie, which is very irritating. Like, at times it sounds a bit like it's a DJ almost, and it's the murderer, the guy who killed his parents. And one thing they do with those scenes is they kind of chop them up, and we slowly see them appear into Billy, like, so he's remembering this stuff. Yeah, it's a little bit drawn out. One thing I do like is then they cut out the attempted rape scene from the original movie, because that was just something of its time where you didn't really need it, and you don't need it now in a modern movie. And they change it up a little bit where the mother actually fights back and gets a shot in and eventually is killed. Or who killed Billy's parents, voice in his head. So I mean, that's kind of dumb, because if it's the killer's voice, so they introduce almost this supernatural thing where he gets infected by the killer's voice, because the killer dies there and then on the spot. But then wouldn't the killer just encourage him to be killing people all the time? It doesn't really make sense. Then he would be this moral compass who would be like warning him at various times, you can't live a normal life, or be careful, don't do that. Because when Billy's doing the whole backstory quite late on in the movie, we start to hear like more detailed things. And I guess it's just the movie having fun, but I mean, I don't really care. I don't want to see all this convoluted backstory that's like telling Billy how to shave. You know, it's like, oh, don't worry, you cut yourself. Like, just put a bit of toilet paper on it. It's like, what is this? Just get on with the bloody movie. Really distracting, and it's not what you want in this sort of movie. It works fine in Dexter as like an ongoing thing, but I don't want it in like a Silent Night, Deadly Night movie, a sequel bait type ending, because eventually Billy is killed, and we see that he is then passed on into his girlfriend. So essentially he becomes her dark passenger, like the killer from the past has been his. Now, I just naturally assumed it would be the killer's voice, because I thought that, but I guess it's because Billy's the one being killed, so he's now being passed to her. So that's their way of trying to set up a cheeky sequel, I think, because that's basically how the movie ends, and it's like, fuck you, movie. That's like, I don't think it's going to happen anyway, because I don't think this movie is doing particularly well. Killer around town, and it turns out there's a link to someone who comes in the store a lot, and it's like, why are you doing all this? You've got a simple premise that is enough for one film. Like, it works for the film because, you know, Billy is still disturbed all these years later. Christmas triggers him and he goes on a killing spree. That is literally all you need. You don't need to try and do this stuff where, okay, you're trying to make us feel sorry for him. You've got these other people in the film who are like meant to be villains, or like they're doing various things. There's killings around town. You had a very simple plot which works perfectly for like a 90 minutes movie. The way to describe this movie is just to try hard, because you get the whole thing when he's explaining the backstory about how the parents killed the granddad because of inheritance, because you open up in the retirement home, dies in front of Billy. You get a little bit of CGI blood spurting out of his mouth, which looks a little bit rough, but yeah, he dies in front of Billy, and later on we find out through the backstory then they did it, they poisoned him and they did it for this. Like, why do you need this? Like, it doesn't have to be that complicated, because also there's a thing where there's a creepy old guy in the home, and he works there as like a janitor or cleaner or something, and he's watching them, and it turns out he's the one who kills the parent. Why can't we just have a very simple, a very campy, a very charming Silent Night, Deadly Night movie? You can still do some modern things with it. You can still like do a couple of little twists on it. The scene in the movie, I think, is the scene where Billy kills a bunch of Nazis at like, because he's been set on to like this woman around town, and so he starts following her, and the twist is then she turns out to be a Nazi. And there's this surreal scene where there's a get together with all these Nazis, and they're dressed as like, they're all dressed festive, they're all dressed as like Santa Clauses and all the rest of it, and he goes on a killing spree to try and get to this woman, because initially he's just there to kill her, but I think once he realizes what they all are, that like sets him off. And I think that scene was a little bit cringe just because the way it's like shoehorning modern politics in was a very funny scene, like the twist to it, like the whole like, let's make it a white Christmas, like white being the key word, and they just made it into a very fun, over the top scene, and there needed to be more of that in the movie. It would have been a lot more fun if it was, yeah, more like that. Up to a point I was with it as like a modern remake where, okay, this isn't too bad, but I think it just, as it got further into the rabbit hole and just trying to be too clever and trying to do too much, and it became very cringe, then it just kept losing me and it kept going down and down, in my opinion. I would say wait till streaming. I know it's definitely had some positive buzz online, but overall it was a disappointment. It didn't really do much for me personally. So there you have it. Silent Night, Deadly Night, the new one. By the way, if you're a patron of mine, so patreon.com/borednow, I am doing commentaries of the original Silent Night, Deadly Night franchises. So I'm working my way through the movies. I've done the first two at the moment. I did number one a couple of years ago. I've recently done number two. There's 5 overall, I think, of the original. So I will be doing at least another 1 or 2 this holiday season. So if you want to get movie, TV commentaries, early access to things, and like some exclusive clips, then you can on patreon.com/borednow. But thanks everyone. Let me know what you think of this new Silent Night, Deadly Night movie. Keep watching horror movies, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
'Twas the night before Christmas, the house locked up tight. Yet a shadow approached in the dead of the night. With a glimmering axe, so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick.
Kind of been drifting my whole life. I'm ready for something real.
Looking for something? Are you okay? I'm gonna figure out what's going on in there.
You, had no idea. What? Naughty.
How many people have you killed?
A lot.
Do you have to dress like Santa?
It helps me slip from Billy into something else. Punish.
Wait. Keep it on.
Are you ready for this? Naughty. Have you been a good boy?